Hi, I'm Meredith Donnelly. I am a secondary art teacher here in Chicago, Illinois.
Hi, I'm Colleen O'Connor, and I am a secondary English language arts and theater teacher here in Chicago, Illinois.
And we will be leading a professional development session today on culturally responsive strategies in the classroom. So, first, we're going to ask ourselves, why are culturally responsible strategies important? So, from the Harvard Educational Review, who plays a active role in the conversation of culture and education, we have this quote. Culturally relevant pedagogy not only addresses student achievement, but also helps students to accept and affirm their cultural identity while developing critical perspectives that challenge inequities that schools and other institutions perpetuate. So while we are, especially here in Chicago or perhaps lower income schools, we see that the pedagogy needs to reflect that of our students, of a multiculturalism that is prevalent in our classrooms, in our students' lives.
We have a few learning objectives for today's professional development session. Learning objective number 1, I can recognize my students' identity, behavior, background, and language. Learning objective number 2, I can differentiate my personal bias, beliefs, and perceptions. Learning objective number 3, I can modify my lessons to reflect appropriate student culture. And lastly, learning objective number 4, I can collaborate with parents and the community. Going straight into our first culturally responsive strategy, recognizing students' identity, behavior, background, and language. In the ESL Teaching Principles for Strategy textbook, it says bilinguals usually acquire and use different languages for different purposes in different domains of life with different people. Different aspects of life often require different languages. Similarly, students of lots of cultures tend to put on different facades when they are in school versus when they are with their family versus when they're at church versus when they are wherever they tend to go. Students sometimes feel like they have to put on a facade to be what they think that the teacher or the adult in the room wants them to be. And so what we want is that to not happen, and for students to feel like they can be exactly who they are, they can express their culture, they can express exactly who they are in the classroom and know that they are being academic just as they are. A really excellent activity that we like to do in our classrooms is a heritage investigation. So first what you'll do is you'll have students research their birthplaces and those of their parents and grandparents. Of course, if they're taken care of by anyone else, then they would research their caretakers as well. Then as a class, you're gonna have students label each location on a map for each birthplace. And then lastly, you're going to have the class connect the students' parents and their grandparents or their caretakers' birthplaces with different colored yarn. Now, this activity is both fun and very educational because students are, of course, using map reading skills. They're also like writing things out, they're doing research. But on top of it, it's also asking students to interact with their families and interact with their caretakers to learn about their backgrounds. And then when it's finished, students have this beautiful art installation almost where you can see how interconnected that the world is and how many cultures are actually within the classroom.
So, our second culturally responsive strategy is a learning target that states I can differentiate my personal bias, beliefs, and perceptions. So, authors Singhal and Gulati from the essay Five Essential Strategies to Embrace Culturally Responsive Teaching say it perfectly that perception may or may not be accurate in the classroom, and being unaware of our biases may influence pedagogical decisions. For an example, in a predominantly white middle class community, unfortunately, teachers may lower expectations based on students' culture and or race. Unconscious biases can also contribute to flawed thinking. Being cognizant of the fact that we all have biases will not change them, but it may help us make informed decisions and value differences from various perspectives so we are not perpetuating inequality. This is so important for teachers to be aware of and then to be proactive of setting expectations in their classroom that everyone is welcome, to celebrate religions and cultures that aren't maybe the norm or the standard that historically schools have laid a foundation of. So one way that we can practice this is by doing a quick partner activity. So we're going to take 5 minutes and we're going to have each of you find a partner and share about maybe your personal experience or maybe biases that you have experienced explicitly or implicitly. So we want you to ask your partner 3 questions. 1, what are explicit or implicit biases that you have experienced? 2, how has your background influenced your teaching experience? And 3, how does your background differ from those of your students? So we're going to take 5 minutes and then we'll come back together as a group. So now that we're back together, this is a great opportunity again to recognize how different you are from your students, how your students are different from each other, and to celebrate those differences, to not only just be aware, but to be excited and to give students an opportunity to speak on behalf of their families and their backgrounds and their cultures. So while this was a great exercise for us to do today during this professional development session, this is also something that you can translate and use in your classrooms.
Our third culturally responsive strategy is modifying lessons to reflect appropriate student culture. As Christopher Edman, a professor of science education at Columbia and author, advocates is to teach kids that it's okay to be, using his word, ratchetdemic, which means ratchet and academic. He basically means being willing to meet students where they are and encourage them that they can succeed in the classroom exactly as they are now. So if students are really into rap, for example, or if they're really into anime, or whatever your students are really into, whatever they feel like expresses them and that they are expressive for, is a really excellent way to not only teach them that it's perfect to be that way, but also be academic at the same time. Having 2 interests is they're not mutually exclusive. So a really excellent English language arts activity that you can do, instead of having students analyze, say, a short story or a poem. How many of those did we study in school? At least I know I did, that were all written by old white men. Have students pick a song that they actively listen to, that they enjoy, and instead have them analyze the lyrics of that. Often songs are written in poetry or in prose format. So that way the students are still getting those same analytical skills, but they're also interacting with something that they enjoy. And then also the class then gets to learn and hear about songs from different cultures, songs from different artists that probably have different ethnic backgrounds than you would normally have if you were analyzing traditional literature.
Lastly, our last learning objective for culturally responsive strategies in the classroom states, I can collaborate with parents and the community. So this quote is from our textbook, the ESL Principles for Success, and it says that collaborating with parents in the community validates students' cultures, communicates that the teachers accept and celebrate multiculturalism to the parents and their students, and provides a casual environment that encourages oral language development. This, again, builds such respect and rapport between the teacher, the student, and their families, but also shows that you can effectively communicate with those at home and celebrate the background that they come from. So a great example of a project to do in class is a show and tell, which is great for all ages, from the littles to the bigs. Everyone can get excited about sharing elements of their culture. So the first step is that you would want to read a book like A Perfect Season for Dreaming, Un Tiempo Perfecto para Soñar, which is about a grandfather who has a dream about all these wonderful things that represent his culture, and from a piñata fall objects and food, and he's so excited to share about these things. So after reading that book, you can have your students think about what objects and food are important in their own lives. What foods do they eat at home with their families? What things do they get excited about that maybe come from their home country or their grandparents' home country? This is also a great opportunity, like our learning objective states, to collaborate with parents and grandparents or guardians in the home. So they can work together to find these objects in their home, to cook foods together, and just really celebrate that culture. And then finally, the students get a chance to bring these things to school, to show and tell, to celebrate together, to eat these wonderful, rich foods, and really be proud of their culture and background.
Thank you all so much for going through our professional development session today. Are there any questions before we wrap everything up? No. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and here are the references that we used throughout the presentation.